Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graben. Our guest today is Cynthia Kay. She's the author of the book Small Business, Big Success, Proven Strategies to Beat the Odds and Grow a Great Business. As a business owner for over 35 years, Cynthia has attracted well-known and respected customers from the global Fortune 100 to smaller, forward-thinking businesses. Along the way, she's developed practical, actionable strategies for businesses from starting up to stepping out. So we'll get to talk about that here in the episode. She's former board chair of the National Small Business Association. She's advocated for small business and spoken to diverse audiences across the country. She's also mentored business owners as a member of the American Academy of Entrepreneurs. Cynthia, thanks for being here on the podcast. How are you?
Oh, this is so fun. I've listened to your podcast and I'm learning a lot.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. We're going to learn a lot from you today and talk about the book and ideas for small businesses. I'm a small business, so I will do my best to be a sponge, and I'm sure there'll be ideas that can help contribute to the success I'm aiming for. So first off, before we talk about the book and everything, Cynthia, I'm going to ask the question that we always start off with here with the different things you've done, the different businesses that you've owned. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
This was really hard, I have to tell you, because I kind of went back and forth. I had like 2 or 3 different ones, but I think I want to share one that maybe business owners might really relate to. So when I first started my business, I started it with a partner. And as you can tell from looking at CK and Co, there is no longer a partner. We were partners for about 8 or 9 years. And I would say that while I don't disagree with partnerships, I think it's really important that you find the right one. And obviously, I did not. So that was my mistake.
So why? I mean,
You want to hear what I did wrong?
Well, sure. I mean, I appreciate you sharing the story. We'd love to hear more of the detail of thinking like, well, thinking you needed a partner, or how did things end up playing out?
Well, so the interesting thing was before I started the business, I did what a lot of people in the broadcast or creative industries do, which is we freelanced, right? So you don't really have a company, but you go out and you do these jobs, and they're generally small jobs. And so this was someone that I had worked with at the broadcasting station that I was working at. And so we freelanced together and we did a couple of jobs. And to be honest with you, it went pretty well. And we were thinking, wow, this is really kind of a good thing. We could maybe make a business out of this. But what I didn't really think about when I started the partnership was I looked at all I'm going to call them the typical things that people do, who's going to own what percent, and, what's the compensation, and, we needed a buyout agreement. I mean, all the stuff that they tell you to do. I did all of that.
Yeah.
What I didn't pay attention to were some of the other things that I think are super important. And that is, what's the person really like? What's their working style? I'm going to call it some of the softer kinds of things. How does the person deal with adversity? Are they a nervous person? Are they confident? Are they somebody that, you want to spend a lot of time with, because you spend more time with your business partner sometimes than you do your family when you're starting a business.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I spent enough time on that personal side of getting to know. We worked together great in the working piece. I mean, I was more the creative, he was more the technical, and that stuff worked really well. But it was the other stuff.
So, how quickly I mean, you said you worked together for 8 or 9 years. Did some of those, if you will, differences kind of pop up immediately, or did it kind of over time
That's a great
grow?
question.
It was a grad. Were you like, did you see a problem? Like, no, I need to stick with it, or did it creep up on you?
Well, I think, initially when you're getting a business started, you're working and you're churning stuff out and you're doing things and everybody's busy, and so you don't notice some things. Where it really started to creep in was when we were starting to grow, when we wanted to
Mm-hmm.
grow. And this was when I discovered that our idea of growth and how we work with people was very, very different.
Yeah.
So I'm the kind of person that wants to surround myself with a lot of people who are smarter than I am. And I want to let them do what they do.
Yeah.
He was the kind of person that really wanted to hold tight to
Mm.
things,
Yeah.
wanted lots of control.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't grow if you want to, if you want to grow, you can't control everything.
Sure.
You just can't do everything. So it became kind of obvious as we were starting to really think about growth
Mm-hmm.
and about how do we add new people and how do we scale the business. And I will tell you that, I don't go into things lightly. So
Mm-hmm.
we tried to work it out.
Yeah.
I jokingly say, but this is the truth. We actually went to business counseling. There
Yeah.
are people who help business owners, kind of get on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
What I discovered when we went to business counseling is that we were not on the same page at all.
Yeah.
Um, and so, from there, it was really a matter of, okay, what are we going to do with this business that we've now grown?
Yeah.
And so we had a couple options. I buy him out, he buys me out. I mean, where we were really fortunate was that we did have the mechanisms in place for
Yeah.
that. So that helped. But there's a lot of angst that goes with that. But in the process of all of that, I kind of came up with something that actually is in the book, and I call it the business prenup. You know
Mm-hmm.
how when people
Yeah.
are getting married, they have, you have a prenup. Well, so in the business prenup, I think you need to think about all the things that can cause problems. Like, does somebody want to work a lot? Does somebody not
Mm-hmm.
want to work that hard? How are you going to get paid? Are you someone that likes to be around people? Are you? So I have a whole list of things that I
Yeah.
think are really important. And I guess those are some of the things that the reason I call it a mistake is because I could have started that business on my own. I
Yeah.
think, truthfully speaking, I think I thought I needed someone who had skills I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
But what I discovered is, there are some things that you can buy that expertise. It doesn't
Sure.
have to be a partner,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like with that progression, it's the leap from doing the work. Sometimes people call that working in the business
Yes.
versus working on the business. And it doesn't always translate. So, doing the work versus building beyond that and growing. And like, when you say the company had grown, like how many employees or what was the scale
Yeah.
of the growth?
Well, where it started, we were fine we started the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
When we brought in one or two others, it was fine. But as we started to grow beyond that, it became difficult because, having one or two more people in the mix. But when you start getting to 4, 5, 6 employees, you have to kind of let things go. I can share with you, how I
Mm-hmm.
say sometimes you have that one lucid moment, like that one thing that you go, oh, and then
Yeah.
everything kind of falls into place. Well, I had walked into our studio, and at the time we ordered a lot of, tapes for the video machines and that kind of stuff. And our office manager, all the boxes were in the middle of the studio. And I said to her, why is all that stuff still in the studio? And she said, well, X hasn't told me yet where to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, just find a place and put it. And she goes, oh no, he will be very upset. And I'm thinking, okay,
Oh,
that's like a little tiny thing in the scheme of things. And that's when I started asking questions,
yeah, yeah,
and sometimes in life we get so busy we're not paying attention to the stuff that's like right in front of us.
yeah.
So that was a big wake up call for me,
I believe it.
and and I think if I'm honest about it, when you're starting a business, those early years are really important. I mean, you have to be on the same page. So
Mhm.
I would say because he wasn't that interested in growth and he wasn't interested in, kind of bringing people up and, letting go of some control, that kind of stunted our growth for,
Oh, mhm.
for some time in there. And we could have grown much faster.
Yeah,
And so there's consequences to those mistakes. But
right,
that's why now when people say to me, should I partner up? And I go, well, yes, maybe. I mean, it could be
right.
the best relationship
Mhm.
ever, or it could be the thing that really holds you back.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you are able to take that experience and share that mistake. And, in the book, you're talking about common mistakes. We can come back to maybe what some of those are. I appreciate that your conclusion wasn't the extreme of never partner because it
No.
didn't work for me. You understand, I think, some of the dynamics of why it
Hmm.
didn't work. And if
Yeah.
you were starting a new company again, not repeating that mistake. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, and you know, the personal side is really tricky.
Hmm.
I know wonderful business partnerships, and so you don't want to say it's bad. But what I do say to people is you got to really take the time to ask the hard questions,
Hmm.
and I think that's the lesson.
Yeah.
And then listen, really listen. Don't
Mhm.
hear what you want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, it seemed like this is a fairly common mistake. A previous guest, Leslie Tane, I had to go look it up. She was a guest in episode 143. She's an attorney. She shared the story in that episode of making a mistake of thinking she needed a partner to
Hmm.
start a law firm. And then as a woman, there was the extra dynamic of she thought she needed a man as
Ooh.
a partner and learned that it wasn't necessary and it didn't turn out to be a good partnership. But so you're not the only one. I think that's one of the broader lessons of this podcast series, Cynthia. You're not the only successful business owner who's made a mistake. And I'm sure that helps you writing for others or coaching and helping others, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. I've often said, even when it comes to other aspects of business, if you do things right, it's like, oh, great. And you move on and you don't maybe spend the time thinking about it. But when you do something and it doesn't work,
Yeah.
wow, that's like a powerful lesson right there because that's when you really learn things.
Hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories and lessons in the book, and one of the pages I just kind of flipped to is something people have talked about here on the podcast. What happens if you make a bad hire? Could you
Oh,
talk about that a little bit?
sure.
Was that a lesson? Everyone's probably made a bad hire, right?
Well, and you know what? It's not a perfect science.
Yeah.
Some of the bad hires that I've made, I've actually done, the testing where, the disc assessments and and I've had them say to me, "Oh, that's a perfect person for your organization." And they turn out not to be a perfect person for your organization.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a couple of things with hires. For one thing that I think is really important is when you're part of an organization is to use your organization.
Mhm.
So I've made bad hires when I've made the decision sometimes in a vacuum. And so what I now do is I
Mm.
have our staff actually do the interviews and spend time with the person
Mm.
because they will see things that maybe I won't see. And
Yeah.
also, they're going to be working with the person. So I think that's an important piece. And so I think getting more input kind of helps you as opposed
Mhm.
to, that sort of thing. I think the other thing is that within an organization, you have what I call a personality, a
Mhm.
culture, and sometimes it's not about can the person technically do the job or do they have the knowledge or that. Where I have seen the fits, not work, the puzzle pieces not come together, is when they don't have the same values. The
Yeah.
culture isn't the right sort of thing.
Right.
So I've actually had some of my staff say to me, this person's really qualified, but I don't think they'll work as hard as I do,
Mhm.
or I don't think they have the same dedication to serving customers. It's like
Mhm.
they kind of want to do their own thing,
Yeah.
and those are really interesting insights. So, but anybody can make a bad hire, I guess. And I've made a lot of them. But a mentor of mine once told me, when you make a bad hire, fix it quickly.
Yeah.
Don't wait,
Mhm.
because it gets worse as time goes on. So if
Yeah.
you find the person is not a good fit, and you've worked with them and you've tried and you've onboarded them well, just you got to let them move on.
Yeah. Yeah, because worst case, that person might not work out and they might chase a couple of other people off first
Sure.
if it's really that bad of a fit. And yeah, I mean, I think, successful companies, for what I've seen, talk about and really define, there's values, which I think of like the things we believe. And then there's a company I work with, KaiNexus software company, that talks about the traits of people that tend to be successful within
Interesting.
KaiNexus that they've kind of looked and tried to evaluate. It's not that everyone needs to be the same,
No.
not at all, but there are certain key traits, and they sort of learn like if you have these traits, you tend to be successful here. It's more behavioral than belief. So I think some of that's connected. But
Hmm.
I'm curious, like for CK and company, like what are some of the behaviors and traits that tend to lead to success?
There's a few. For
Yeah.
one thing, people who are curious
Hmm.
and motivated
Hmm.
do very well here,
Yeah.
because we don't put people in boxes and say, go do this or go do this. So someone who's curious and really wants to learn
Hmm.
is really good. We need people who are extremely flexible and can solve problems,
Hmm.
because with what we do, we will go out on location to shoot videos, and honestly, it's if you're a nervous person and you're not a problem solver, you're going to get out
Hmm.
there and be very frustrated, because often you're walking into things that you may have planned, but it doesn't go according to the plan.
Yeah.
So we have found that people who are really good at problem solving, being flexible, figuring out another path, fun. I mean,
Yeah.
I will tell you, we people here have fun,
Hmm.
and that's one of our characteristics. We enjoy doing what we do. We like having fun together. We laugh. We don't take ourselves too seriously.
Uh-huh.
So I think some of those things, I have often said, we can teach people to punch the buttons, but we
Hmm.
can't teach attitude. We
Right.
can't teach, the drive that people
Hmm.
need to have. That just kind of comes from inside.
Yeah. Yeah. And every company has their own, as you were saying earlier, different companies have their own personality.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's, one set of personality traits that's the only way to be successful. But yeah, it's got to be, I think, kind of compatible with the owner or co-owners or
Mhm.
co-founders. Um, I was also going to ask though. So I was going to ask for a little bit more of your backstory that's not in the bio. I'm curious. Like, tell us a little bit more about the work with video production. Was your background on camera?
Yes. Well, I
Tell us
did both.
more about
So,
that and how that evolved into becoming an entrepreneur.
yeah. So, I started in broadcasting right out of school. And to be very honest with you, I have a degree in music, applied voice, and
Oh,
I got kind of curious about the television world, so I ended up getting a double major in TV and radio, and then went into television. And I pretty much did everything in television. I mean, I started with a kids show that I did live. It was live to tape. It was very fun. I did a talk show. I did feature reporting. I did investigative reporting. I produced a show called PM Magazine, which was like a magazine type show.
Oh, I remember that
Yeah,
show.
I was the
Yeah.
executive producer for that for a local TV station.
Hmm.
So I did a lot of things.
Yeah.
And broadcasting to me was a great training ground.
Hmm.
I think it's a wonderful place because you learn to ask the right questions. You learn to walk into different situations and try and get information and content. Um, my last experience wasn't a pleasant one.
Mm.
In 6.5 years, I think I worked for 4 different owners.
Hmm.
So there was like constant turnover. And long story short, my last job, they said I made too much money and I got fired.
Oh,
Yeah, so which was interesting, but it actually all worked out. I
yeah.
should send flowers to those
Cool.
people because they did me a huge favor. When you talk about making a mistake, um, at that point, I could have gone back into another TV station. I had that opportunity, and I decided to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I decided, going back into broadcasting somewhere else would have been a mistake. I
Yeah.
was done with it. I was bored.
Yeah.
And so I decided to start my own business. And I did what I knew. I'd
Yeah.
been freelancing. So I kind of knew that business. And I went out, and in the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, I found 2 or 3 customers, and I never looked back.
Yeah.
Launched the business.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear a story about avoiding a mistake in hindsight.
In hindsight.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you might everyone who starts a business probably wonders, oh, am I making a mistake in doing this, or what
Yeah.
mistakes am I going to make that I'm going to learn from? But it's good to have that recognition of if you had gone back into broadcasting, you might have quickly learned it was a mistake, but you anticipated that one.
What's interesting is when I was thinking about what was my big mistake, actually, the one that I almost talked about today
Mm-hmm.
was that I think I stayed too long in broadcasting.
Mm.
I think it was a mistake that I didn't start the business sooner. And the reason I say that is I was ready. I always thought I wanted to own a business. My dad was a small business owner, but I think you go along and you go, do I have enough experience? Do I
Mm-hmm.
know enough? Can I get the money? There's all those questions.
Yeah.
So I would say if there was another mistake I made early on is I probably stayed too long in broadcasting and should have moved on and done my own
Mm-hmm.
thing sooner.
So we get a bonus mistake from
Bonus
Cynthia,
mistakes.
from our guest
I
Cynthia.
got lots of them, as
Well,
most people do.
we all do, and that's where I've learned. I think I've mentioned in other episodes. It's a mistake to allow the guest to be surprised by that question. What's your favorite mistake? Because it does take a little time to think. Okay, well, how am I going to answer that? So again,
Mhm.
you're not alone in that. So again, we're joined by Cynthia Kay. The book is Small Business, Big Success: Proven Strategies to Beat the Odds and Grow a Great Business. I'm going to hold it up here for those who are watching. Can you talk, Cynthia, a little bit about, there's a section in the book about this common mistakes that small business owners make that they either need to learn from quickly, or maybe you can help them avoid? What comes to mind?
Well, there's a couple of mistakes that I think come to mind. One is, sometimes business owners are really good at what they do, but
Right.
they may not have that much experience in leading an
Mm-hmm.
organization. Okay, they've got the know-how. What you talk about is working in the business, but not on the business.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I see as a big mistake is that they aren't really good at articulating their vision for where they're going, so that people who are coming into the organization buy in and really become fanatics, brand fanatics of it. And the big mistake that I see is a thing I call floating balloons.
Mm.
And floating balloons is where a business owner isn't exactly sure what they're going to do. So they kind of float some trial balloons and they let them blow around in the wind.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake because it does not show leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And that's both internally and externally, right?
Right. Right.
It's, well, I'm thinking about doing this, but, I think people need to really get good at articulating the vision and understanding that maybe that may not be popular
Yeah.
always. And I see that with some business owners. They want to be best friends with their employees.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that becomes problematic in the long term.
Right.
So I think that's a big mistake. Another mistake that I see that business owners make is that they don't think far enough down the road. I say you should have an exit plan before you open the doors, but most people don't. And
Right.
and when someone says, well, why would you want to do that? You're just starting the business. And I say, well, if you know how you want to grow it and run it, you're going to do it a certain way. If you're creating a business that you want somebody to acquire, or you want to acquire other businesses, that's you're going to grow in a certain way. If you're growing what I call a lifestyle business, it's something that's going to provide you an income. You may have one or two employees, but you're not trying to grow some big machine. Well, that's a different path. But if you know how you want to exit, it really makes it very clear to you what are some of the ways that you're going to operate the business. So that's another big mistake, is
Yeah.
not paying attention. And I have business owners who go, well, I'm gonna run it until I die. And I go, well, maybe, but
Yeah.
but we're all gonna die at some point. So it might be good to give it just a little bit of thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Or what happens if that turns out not to be true, of wanting to work until the day you die, or needing to. Those are different things.
Yeah. And I think the last thing that I would tell business owners as a big mistake is not getting the right resources in place. Sometimes business owners want to do everything themselves, and I get it. I understand that. But, having a really good team of people, having a great CPA and accountant, having a really good insurance people, because lots of things happen today with liability and cybersecurity and all those other things. And having someone who's, a really good business attorney. Yeah, you're paying those people, but the cost of mistakes is way greater than what you pay them. So, and the other thing that people I don't think understand is, the regulations change so fast that it's way too hard for me to keep up. So I kind of have a team of people that I rely on to kind of be my gatekeepers and go, you really don't want to do that because this new regulation over here. So, don't be afraid to pay for some expertise. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And that, well, so I want to go back when you talked about, the leader who kind of floats balloons and doesn't want to lead. I mean, that's a different end of the spectrum from the control freak, where the control freak kind of breeds the dependence of, I'm only going to do what the boss told me to do. And then that other extreme of people thinking like, well, everyone's going to agree on everything. And I don't
No, it's not going to
You can't have
happen.
a workplace be a democracy. Like I'm all for people having input.
Yeah.
But sometimes the boss, the leader, the owner has to be the decider.
Yeah.
As somebody once said. So.
Well, and I think the business world has really changed a lot. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I've changed how I am as a leader in the last 35 years. I would say that I was probably much more rigid, more, I had a picture. And over the years, what I've learned is, I can still have that picture, but I really need to be more open to what's happening in the workplace. And right now, I mean, I got 5 generations working in my place. And
Wow.
that's really interesting sometimes.
Yeah.
And they care about different things. And
Hmm.
but I think it's made us like stronger. It
Hmm.
can be really frustrating too. It's like, why
Yeah.
don't you get this? And they're going,
Yeah.
well, why do you do it that way? But I think there's a lot to be said for really embracing that. And I think some people believe that today, they can just set the path and people are going to go down it. And that is not what happens. People have to
Yeah.
buy in and they have to understand why it is you're doing something. So I think I spend a lot of time on what I call business literacy with my
Hmm.
folks, talking about why are we doing this and what are our options and why
Yeah.
is this a better option than that? So
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah. No, nobody has a crystal ball. The world's changing more quickly, sometimes more unpredictably. I mean, in startup circles, I think the idea of the 5-year business plan has been really poo-pooed. And you're you're shaking your head. Tell me more about your thoughts on that.
Well,
Right.
maybe 10 years ago you could do that, but what I've discovered is that the landscape is changing so fast. I mean, it's not. I think 3 is about what you can have. I
Hmm.
mean, I would say 3, and I like to say, what are some of these short term things we're going to do? The whole premise of agile, if you're familiar with
Hmm.
agile, is you take the problem and you do it in sprints. You do a
Yeah.
little of this and then you check it and then you do a little of that. I think that's more the way people are working rather than having this big plan. I
Right.
mean, we do what I call pilot programs. We'll
Mm.
test something out. If it
Hmm.
works, great. Then we roll it out to everything. And
Yeah.
manufacturers have always been good at that. I
Yeah.
think some of the rest of us are learning from them that those pilot programs are
Mhm.
really a great way to do it, because if it doesn't work, you scrap it and move on.
Yeah. And it's better to make a small mistake and learn from it
Mhm.
to avoid a huge failure. Right.
Absolutely. Although,
And
those huge failures are, they're going to happen too.
so when one other thought or question for you, when failures or mistakes happen, what are your thoughts, or what can leaders do to build resiliency about that, of making sure we're more likely to bounce back from a setback?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess there's a couple of things. One is, and I've learned this from my big customers, this idea of building a learning organization, a culture,
Hmm.
where what I say to people is you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay, but I need to know when you make
Yeah.
the mistake. We need to own it.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And then what we need to do is kind of autopsy it, figure
Mm.
out what went
Yeah.
wrong and
Right.
why did this happen. I mean, did we not communicate properly? Did we not have the right resources? Did we not train somebody? And it takes time to do a lot of that. But if you don't, what happens is you actually spend more time down the road.
Yeah.
So in my mind, not just saying you have a learning organization, but really living it.
Right.
And when people make mistakes, you don't throw them out the door.
Yeah.
You work with them and you figure it out. So to me, that's one of the big things about what we can do. I think the other thing is to benchmark with other people. I'm really lucky in that I belong to a couple of business organizations. One is a statewide organization, Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hmm.
And some of the smartest people I know are business owners in that group. And I think you learn a lot, and being open to say to people, I'm struggling with this as a business owner. There's a group of us that are on a chain, and we'll throw something out and people will respond.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know this. What have you
Hmm.
experienced? That's how you get better. The smartest person in the room is not the person who knows everything, but the person who knows the right questions to ask.
Yeah.
That's the smartest person in the room,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. That's so well said. That's so keeping in line with the themes that we try to emphasize here on my favorite mistake. So yeah, really, really glad to hear you articulate that. One other question, though, going back to you mentioned the 5 generations, and generations are different because of age or because of the environment they grew up in with technology or society or what have you. But are you able to find enough common ground in terms of those traits of being able to admit a mistake and learn from it? And how are you navigating that with
Yeah.
your workplace?
Well, one of the things I think is early in the relationship. I mean, before you onboard people, you need to be asking questions about this.
Yeah.
And you can get a good sense from people if they are open to learning things.
Yeah.
And so I think, making sure that you all sort of have that sort of common ground. But I think navigating the different generations, I'm going to be honest with you, there are times when you just have to disagree. I mean,
Hmm.
it is not going to all be rosy. I mean,
Yeah.
there are times when I have to say, I know you think this, but somebody has to make the decision and I'm making the decision.
Yeah.
And then there are times when I will actually throw it back at them and say, okay, you all make this decision, and have them be a part of that. I don't think there's one right way.
Hmm.
I think, and it also depends too on whether or not you actually do what you say you will do.
Hmm.
Because there are times when I will do things as a business owner that my employees, don't agree with. But what I have always said to them is, I am always going to be direct with you, and I will always do what I say.
Hmm.
And in 35 years, I've
Yeah.
never had an employee come back and say, you promised and you didn't do. So
Yeah.
if you're going to do it, you promise. But I will often say, I can't promise you. This is where
Hmm.
I want to go. This is what I'd like for us to do, but I can't promise. And I
Yeah.
think people appreciate that directness. I think we've lost a little bit of that directness in the workplace. And I think
Mm.
that's too bad, because
Yeah.
we're worried about, are we going to hurt someone's feelings, or are
Hmm.
we going to be politically correct, or are we, and all those things are important, but you can disagree with someone and say it in a respectful way.
Yeah.
That's what you do. You
Well,
don't have to agree with people.
yeah. Well, and then I think one of the most important dynamics for a business is what happens when someone disagrees with the owner, with the
Mhm,
boss. How do they handle that? Because
mhm.
there's the one set of reactions that's going to drive people back into that shell of, well, I'm going to just do exactly what I'm told. and,
Yeah.
and as opposed to being able to have respectful discussions. And I'm just sensing, so let me turn it into a question, that um, you may disagree, but you're open to somebody disagreeing.
Yeah. In fact, I ask them to disagree with
uh,
me.
yeah.
I say, go ahead, poke some holes in what I'm thinking. I want you to help me think differently about this.
Yeah.
And if you give people permission to do that, and then you have to be really careful, because sometimes they will say something really dumb. And what you don't want to do is ever make someone feel, no, seriously,
I
because
know. Yeah.
because
No, I'm
what
listening.
happens then
Yeah.
is, at some point they're going to have a really important question and they're not going to ask you because
Mm.
you made them feel dumb, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
you have to watch your reaction, and I think that's hard for some people,
Yeah.
um, and and be open to the fact that, what I teach people to do is say, you know what, I haven't thought of it that way. Give me some time to think about it, and I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
And then you got to go away and think about it and come back.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
And I'm sure you follow up that way,
Oh, I
like you were
do.
saying.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
follow-up is
Because
huge.
Well,
Yeah.
because there's nothing worse when people, I mean, it's passive aggressive when someone says, like, oh, I'll go think about it. And then you never hear
You
anything.
never hear from
You
them
learn,
again.
I'm going to go think about it means
Yeah,
no, never. And I'm glad I believe you about, yes, that
yeah,
follow up. Yep. Cynthia does what she says she's going to do. No, I got that.
yeah. Well, and it's funny because it's interesting how some people are not used to. I'm a pretty straight shooter. I'm a direct
Mhm.
person. And I had one employee who said to me, the first few months I thought you were mad at me. And I went, why? He goes, well, you always kept asking me, well, why are you doing that? And I said, well, because I wanted to know why were you doing that?
Right.
you know?
Questions of inquiry, not judgment.
Yes.
Right. Yeah,
So
and
funny.
I've seen leaders fall into that trap in kind of in the other direction where somebody's made a change or an improvement in the workplace and they're proud of it. And some visiting executive, I've seen people get in trouble with this. They'll ask, "Well, why didn't you do such and such?"
Oh,
And I
yeah.
and I can see from your reaction to that, like, "Ooh, that
Oops.
it wasn't meant to sting, but it did," because
Instead
people
of
would take
saying,
it as a
why did you
criticism.
do that?
Mhm.
Let the person explain to you. I think we've lost some of our really good communication skills.
Mm.
Some of that, people can blame it on whatever you want to blame it on. You can blame it on COVID. You can blame it on device chaos. You can blame it on whatever you want. But the truth
Yeah.
of it is, if people want to be really good communicators, they have to work at it.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
And learn from your communication and miscommunication mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
And there
Yeah.
is a section in the book here on frequent communication mistakes. So there's really a lot. I mean, this is a very broad and encompassing guide for a small business owner. The culture stuff is incredibly important, but there's a lot in here about contracts and hiring and IT, and really
Yeah.
looks like a valuable guidebook for people.
Well, and you know what we tried to do is, I looked around and there's a lot of stuff for people who are starting up or people who are doing whatever. But, I wanted to look at startup and then operations and growth and stepping out because really you could be in growth mode, but then starting up a new piece of your business. So you kind of have to go back. I mean, it's an iterative process if you think about it.
Yeah.
We often take steps back and then three steps forward. So that's kind of why I wanted to cover that broad range.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did. And again, thank you for sending me a copy of the book, Cynthia. The
Oh,
title is Small Business, Big Success: Proven Strategies to Beat the Odds and Grow a Great Business. So there will be information in the show notes about how you can learn more about the book and Cynthia's websites, and everything will be in there. So, Cynthia, has been such great fun. I know, remember from when we talked earlier. So you're a perfect fit for the show, and
oh,
and
thank you.
some of the values and traits that we try to exhibit and encourage here about being able to admit mistakes, being able to take feedback from people, creating an environment where everyone can speak up and learn and move forward. So really enjoyed the conversation and
Oh, thanks.
everything you had to share today.
Well, thank you. And I just really appreciate the opportunity.
So sure thing. Thanks.